Okay, we're going to be trying to implement our taxi to egg collision. It's really late and I've missed a couple days, but I've needed a break and it's been nice to just, take a little break. Been so busy with work and everything. I want to do so. Like, let's. I guess if a taxi collides with with its egg, right? Not just any egg, but its egg. If it collides with that, then the egg needs to disappear. So egg needs graveyard. This is just some pseudocode here to try to talk through what we need to happen if our taxi collides with its egg. So we need the egg to go to the graveyard. We need the taxi to go to the graveyard. And then we need to instantiate a new vulture at the egg's location. Not quite eggs X and Y, but shifted to be the standing height of the vulture. But not only is this just a vulture instantiation, this is a upgraded tier. Instantiation. So tier 1 is, if a what is it called? What are the red ones called? The red vultures. Bounder. So if a bounder hatches, if a bounder hatches, it'll spawn the taxi. That's what I call it. And then if the taxi collides with the egg, the bounder's egg, then it'll instantiate a new vulture at the eggs X and Y, and it will be a hunter, which is white. And then if a white one hatches and the taxi for that one grabs the egg, it'll hatch into a Shadow Lord, which all have different AIs. So this is probably the reason I've been putting off programming this part, is because this part requires a tier system upgrade for our vulture instantiation, which we don't have yet. Because not only do we need new logic, but we need the new sprites, which isn't a huge deal. I'm just making it a bigger deal. It's just that the thing is, right now we're overriding the eggs global table at index 1 with our tester egg. Which is why when the first egg hatches, it erases that tester egg, is because it's getting overwritten in the correct way. Let's take a look at our code here. And we're going to be looking for how we're doing the taxi in our play state here. So here we give ourselves a taxi object, a taxi instantiation. Now this is outside of our taxi table. Now we should have a taxi table, which we do here. Getting instantiated in the graveyard, and we need to do that for debugging reasons. Because Lua, if you try to print out a value that is nil, it'll just crash. Which I'm actually still a little confused about, because I've had it before where it prints out a nil value. I just don't, if you print out an unassigned nil value, no, I don't know why it would do that, because I've seen it prints out nil. It'll print out nil. Like, nil is helpful in that way, where it'll print out if it's an unassigned value. But if we don't do this, and then we try to print something out, it just crashes. So this is why I've had to do it like this. So right now, it's just a little tricky because I'm trying to do the function, but not for all the taxis just yet, because I'm trying to test it, trying to make sure that when a taxi hits the egg, we instantiate an upgraded vulture tier. So right now we'll probably have to write a function. Do we have, in our taxi class, do we have we've got a left collide, a right collide, a bottom collides, but we don't have a general AABB collision, which I think is what we need, because we're not, it doesn't matter what side we collide with the egg, it just matters that we collide. Now, we can give it a little bit of a buffer so that it doesn't disappear before it looks like the vultures touched it, because with the rectangles it'll look like that. So maybe we just give it a AABB collision, but with a little bit of a buffer, making a smaller hitbox on the vulture's end. And then we can, right now, we would just run that function on, we would run it on our taxi 1, which is our tester taxi, and we would run it on eggs 1, which is the corresponding egg for that taxi 1, but when we do the final code, we'll have to do, we'll have to check the taxi for the collision. Actually, yeah, we don't check for any collision on any egg. We check it for the corresponding index egg, which is one reason I thought it would be a good idea to include as a parameter the index at which a taxi is in the global table. So we can say, you know, if taxi 1 collides with eggs 1, then we know we need to get a new vulture. Oh, shoot, so how does that work with the global table of vultures? Well, no, it makes sense still, because if vulture 1 gets popped, if vulture 1 gets killed, it turns into an egg at eggs 1. Then if egg at eggs 1 hatches, it'll become a jockey at jockeys 1. And then if the jockey is collected, so yeah, we'll need to have our collision detection on not only the egg, the corresponding index of our egg, but the corresponding index of our jockey, just in case it has hatched. But in either way, if the taxi collides with the egg or the jockey of the corresponding index, then we should instantiate a new vulture at the same index, just at the higher tier. So we'll probably, if we don't require a parameter for the type of tier that we're spawning our vultures at, we'll have to manually change the field of our vulture object to be the correct tier. And then in our vulture code, we'll have to say, hey, if tier 1, here's the tier 1 logic. If tier 2, here's the tier 2 logic, and then vice versa on the render. Say, hey, for tier 1, render. We'll have to do something actually different, because it'll probably be in the update function. We'll say our vulture sprite gets updated to be a different quad. Actually, not even a different quad, a different atlas. Jesus. Yeah. Because right now the vulture sprite is a quad, but the quad is the... Actually, yeah, where are we doing that? Setting the viewport right here to the self.atlas. But this is just setting the viewport. Where's our self.atlas? Is this Bounder Atlas? Yeah, see, Bounder Atlas. We need also the Hunter Atlas and Shadow Lord Atlas. But I'm not seeing where we actually say, because this is just the X and the Y, source X and Y of our atlas, not our actual picture. Because we're saying the viewport. I'm actually a little confused how this is working now. Because when we render, we say, oh, this is how it's working. Yeah, so vulture sprite is just the quad. It doesn't tell you what picture it's drawing. It just tells you what slice of the atlas you're drawing. And here is saying, hey, we're drawing our atlas. And then up here we're saying, hey, our atlas is actually the Bounder Atlas, which isn't gonna be the case. You know, it starts off as Bounder Atlas if it hatches. Yeah, so we'll have to, that's where we'll have to change our tier system. So yeah, we'll have to figure out how we're going to be doing that. We could use we could literally use an integer to keep track of what tier we're at, and then simple if logic. If we're tier 1, our atlas is Bounder Atlas. If we're tier 2, our atlas is Hunter Atlas. If we're tier 3, our self.atlas is our Shadow Lord Atlas. Now, do we have... Curious if we have those atlases just yet. If we take a look in our just source pics, we have indeed got a Shadow Lord Atlas of blue. And as long as we got a Hunter Atlas of white, Bounder Atlas of red. So it looks like we already made our sprites for it, which is nice. Then we can just check our play state, make sure we include them as drawables, which should be under this, Bounder Atlas. We should have this here. It's looking like we're not. Oh, it's in our main. Oh, we've got all our atlases imported as drawables. So we can do something like this. Like I guess it's fine to init our atlas at a Bounder Atlas, but here under our update function, we should probably check the tier system. So like if self.tier not assigned but is equal to 1. So we can say here, we're gonna set our self tier when we... Then this might not actually be perfect to put in the init. I don't know if the original has any wave that initializes vultures at anything other than a red Bounder. So for now we'll put this here in the init, but it's probably different. Well, it might not be different. I just don't know yet. So here, if self tier 1, then this is where we put this Bounder Atlas. So we're gonna say, hey, for tier systems 1, our atlas is actually Bounder Atlas. And then we can say else if self tier is 2. And our atlas will actually be Hunter Atlas. This is our drawable that we declared in our main function. For now, if it's not tier 1 or tier 2, it has to be tier 3, so we can just do an else. We could be verbose about it if we want, but it should work. Atlas would get Shadow Lord. Atlas. So, since we're rendering our Atlas at the quad of the sprite that we're setting, the quad shouldn't change depending on what sprite we're at. So, I'm guessing if we set our self tier to 2 upon init, I'm hoping we'll have a white taxi instead of a red taxi. But actually, yeah, it's not taxi, it's vulture. Yeah, I'll switch this just yet. We'll do let me check our, oh, and you know what? Yeah, this is a little different. So if you take a look at this, we've got red eye vultures. Got red eye vultures here. We've got white eye vultures. We've got blue eye vultures. But the thing is, the white is what comes out of a bounder, because the white taxi colliding with an egg or a jockey makes a white hunter, which begs to the question of what makes a red eye taxi? Does killing a Shadow Lord make an egg that when hatched turns into a bounder or turns into a Shadow Lord again? I don't think I've killed and let a Shadow Lord hatch, so I don't exactly know, but we need to do this different. We need to have well, let's see what our taxi Atlas here. See, we have this thing called Taxi 1 Atlas. So if we duplicate this and we say this is a Taxi 2 Atlas, we're trying to make Taxi 1 Atlas is a what? White eye? Yeah, white eye. So we need a blue eye taxi. So we're going to open this in a sprite here very quickly, very easily, making a blue Shadow Lord, but I want to use the exact same color as our Shadow Lord. So if we open up Shadow Lord Atlas in a sprite, we can sample with the eyedropper tool the actual blue that we're wanting for these eyes with the pencil tool. So this Taxi 2 Atlas we save as a PNG file. Now we've got the 2 taxis. I remember trying to figure out if a red eye taxi ever came out, and I want to say we did kill a Shadow Lord, but it didn't hatch a bounder egg. So we might only need the 2. We'd have to do a little more research to see if that is in fact the case, but I don't like that it's called Taxi 1 and Taxi 2. I want it to be called Bounder Taxi. Bounder Taxi would be... See, no, that's a little different, because... No, it would be a Hunter Taxi. So we can say Hunter Taxi Atlas is a white eye, because a Hunter's white eye, and a Shadow Lord Taxi Atlas. Shadow Lord Taxi Atlas. And then our Hunter Taxi Atlas. So let us make sure in our main that when we put our Taxi 1 Atlas, we're actually calling it Hunter taxi atlas. And the file path is hunter taxi atlas PNG. But we also need our Shadow Lord taxi atlas that gets PNG of the same name. Shadow Lord taxi atlas. And then we need to make sure in our taxi class that we're assigning our atlas to be not taxi 1 atlas, but to be our hunter taxi atlas. Now, is our taxi 1 atlas being used anymore? Anywhere else? Taxi 1 sprite. Yeah, I think we're okay on that. So, I'm curious if anything's busted at the moment. Vulture 45. Really? Attempt to index field atlas, which is a nil value. We don't set our atlas? Oh, we set our atlas here. So yeah, we need to set, since our quad takes place using an atlas, we need to define our atlas before we assign that quad. Cool. Okay, hold on. It was just strange that the vulture 1 appeared there. We can probably turn off vulture 1 here while we test. Go to our play state, wherever our vulture 1 is here. Right here. So we can turn off our vulture 1 here. So we just have our egg and our taxi. So I want to see if we change our atlas on our taxi class to be the different tier that we would get the blue eye taxi instead of the white eye taxi. So let's see if in our taxi class here, right here, so look, if we put a Shadow Lord taxi atlas instead of our self atlas, we should have blue eyes. And we do. So that would be a Shadow Lord taxi. Perfect. So if we put our hunter atlas back, now we need to init our atlas before we assign our sprite here, but we need the same thing where we need our taxi tier system. So I guess a taxi tier 1 would be there would only be 2 tiers of taxi, assuming that killing a Shadow Lord or a Shadow Lord taxi egg collision would mean another Shadow Lord, which I think is the case. Then there would only be 2 tiers for our taxi versus our 3 tiers for our vulture. Our bounder, meaning a tier 1 taxi, which is a hunter taxi, which is a white eye taxi. Then our hunter hatch, which would make a Shadow Lord taxi, and then a Shadow Lord hatch, which would make another Shadow Lord. So yeah, two tiers for our atlases on our taxi class. Seems right. So we've confirmed that the sprites are working. We just need to do a field called tier. So our self tier in our taxi class gets 1, and then we need to say update, we say if our self tier is equal to 1, then we need to set our self.atlas to the hunter taxi atlas. So otherwise, meaning if our self tier is 2, we would need to set our atlas to Shadow Lord atlas. So right here, if we look at how it loads first, white eyes, see that? So yeah, we got white eyes because that is a bounder. No, it is a hunter taxi because it would be hatched from a bounder, which would make a hunter taxi. So if we actually die as a hunter, we would do something like this where we say, hey, our taxi tier is now equal to 2, which should trigger our new atlas. So if our tier is 2, meaning a hunter died, hopefully that would give us blue eyes. And that just made a hunter. No, that just made a Shadow Lord. Oh, yeah, Shadow Lord, not Shadow Lord Atlas, Shadow Lord Taxi Atlas. That should make the blue-eyed taxi. Yes, not the full-on Shadow Lord. Then that's looking like it's working then. We just need to add collision. I say just, but it's like, yeah, so we need to add our AABB collision with a little bit of a buffer inwards on our taxi class. And then when a collision is detected, it needs to set the egg, the corresponding egg index to the graveyard true, and then the corresponding taxi to graveyard true. And then we need to instantiate a vulture at the index with the upgraded tier at the egg's location. Yes. Shifted by whatever height for the vulture. It'll be a 8. 8 negative, meaning upwards, shifting on our egg.y. Because our egg is 8 pixels tall and our standing vulture would be a 16 tall. Oh, okay. So I know I didn't do a lot today. I'm wanting to call it just because I'm freaking tired. But we've got our sprites. You know, we've got our sprites in there. Let's see. If we run a git diff, we'll see that we imported a new sprite atlas for our Shadow Lord, which is what we made in a sprite very easily. Then we renamed our Taxi 1 atlas to Hunter Taxi Atlas. We started adding a tier field, which would then set the appropriate atlas in our taxi class. And then we added a tier system in our vulture that would hopefully also set our vulture atlas. And that's all we've done today. But I was not going to program today. I was going to go to sleep, but I wanted to program, so we got something done. I'm going to git add everything with a commit message saying added Shadow Lord Taxi Atlas, and then started adding dot tier fields to taxi and vulture classes. And then we git push it to our origin main, And tomorrow, I'm going to actually implement the collision detection. So we'll write a AABB collision function for our taxi class, and then we'll have to check that function against its corresponding index egg. And if that is true, we set the egg and the taxi to graveyard, and then we need to instantiate a vulture at the given index's tier +1. So we'll do that, and then we'll have to add our separate AI for our upgraded tier, which shouldn't be too bad. It's gonna be a higher DX, so move a little faster, left and right, and then a slightly higher jump DY. So I'll probably keep the flapping the same. Well, in the original, it looks like they go flapping haywire, so I might keep the jump DY the same. I'll just make them flap more as the tier system goes up. That might be the case. I think that will probably be the case. Yeah, so what's on the list tomorrow? I'm going to try to do it in the morning so I don't do any more late night sessions. I want to get in the habit of programming early in the morning so I knock it out and I don't miss any days and I just get it done as a part of my morning ritual. We'll see how that goes.